Hey everyone, welcome to my quilt lab. I'm Cynthia. Thanks for joining me. And today I'm working on a Banyan Batiks by Northcott block of the month, Symphony. It is month 5, block number 5, and it's arguably probably the easiest block, so I'm going to throw some extra tips in for getting those points to match up. Let's dig in and find out what we're doing. Let's go. All right, block 5, month 5 is the 9-patch block. You'll see that you're going to be making 3 different versions, whether you're doing the colorful or what I'm doing, the neutral way. You'll see that I already have blocks B and C finished. You're making 1 of block B and 2 of block C, and I have block number 1 or block A to work on today. So unarguably this is, and the 9-patch is probably one of the easiest, and usually you see the 9-patch done as strip sets, so you'd make a strip of the first version, which is also the third row, first row and third row, and then you'd also make a strip of that second row, but we're only making 4 blocks in total, so it's really kind of pointless to make strip sets, and instead we're just cutting out squares to get the number that we need. So if you've been following along with my other blocks, you'll see that I like to keep everything nice and labeled, and let's just lay everything out really quickly. Okay, block A uses fabrics 5 and 8. That's why I have them nice and labeled and ready to go. And it's pretty simple. We're going to be turning these into rows first, and then putting the rows together in the big block. Let me grab another one so you can see what I've done, and I'll zoom into it so you can take a nice close look. So this is the finished block 5B. I'm going to be pressing towards the darker block, which in block B and C is those outside corner points, but for this one, block A, it's going to actually be that north, south, east, west, the fabric 8. And I'm always going to be pressing towards the dark side because we're going to make sure that when we get into rows, those rows get combined into the columns, that it's going to nest really nicely. And you can see right here how nicely those points meet up. And you'll see them in all those 4 corners. They really butt up next to each other, and I'll do a zoom in when I get to that. You'll also notice that I went ahead and opened up the last 2 seams, and that's just a personal preference. Feel free to either press to one side or the other. It's totally up to you. But that's pretty much it when it comes to the 9-patch. Let's get going. I'll of course take some pictures as I go, and then we'll stop and we'll talk about that nesting point up when we get the rows done. But for now, to the machine. Okay, so I'm down to that last seam. So let me just talk about what I do when I'm nesting these things. So let me just turn everything over so you can see that I have indeed pressed towards the dark side so that the 3 layers is on top of that greenish one, and the 1 layer is on that creamy color. That way, they'll almost butt up against each other. And you're going to put that seam right on top of the other seam. So ideally, when I take a pin and I put it through the seam on this top side, it should come out on top of the seam on the other side. And it sure does, right all the way through. And that's how I usually take it to the machine. I keep it right there. But let me show you another way, because there are a lot of people who don't like to do the pins right on top of seams. So on this other side, I'm going to butt it up against, just like I did the first time. And instead of putting I'm just using my finger and thumb to hold it together. And instead of putting my pin right through the thread, I'm going to put a pin on either side of the seams. So when I stitch, I'm coming down the side, and once I'm on top of all the layers, just on this side of the pin, I'll take the pin out. Whereas on this one, I'll take it out just before I'll come across the seam and take out the second one. That way it stays pretty stable and will keep those points the way they ought to be when it's complete. Okay, so I'll take this to the machine and I'll be right back, and then we'll talk about squaring this up if we need to. To the machine. All right, so I'm back, and let me just turn it over. Like I mentioned earlier, I did go ahead and open up these seams. It's just me. I just like the way it lays nice and flat when it's finished. Now, these should measure out to 6.5. And if I lay that on there, I am so close to being perfect. But if you want to be absolutely perfect, let's talk about squaring this up. I did grab my rotating mat because I like to use it when I'm squaring things up. And when I'm looking at the square with something that's obvious, I'm trying to find the straightest of lines. And I'm just ever so slightly crooked here. So I'm going to choose these as my parallels instead of those. I know, I'm being really particular here. So I'm laying it on my mat, and I'm just looking at two edges right now, the top and my left. But I'm mostly interested in that center square because I know that's supposed to be the circle, right, or the center, right? So there, if I put the ruler right on top of it, it should be a perfect 2 inches. And I'm off just a hair. Not too bad. I'm going to call it pretty good. I don't believe I'm going to line this up with another 9 patch, so I don't have to worry about that. But let me show you what I do, because I want that square to be absolute center. So doing a little quilt math, that line, that seam right there should be 2¼ inches. Because remember, these squares were originally 2.5, so if you take off the 1/4 inch for the seam allowance, it should be 2¼ So I'm lining that 2¼ right on that seam, and I'm just checking out this side, and there is just a little overhang, so I'm going to grab my blade and I'm going to square it up. All right, so this edge is finished. So this is my finished edge, and this is where that rotating mat comes in real handy. I leave everything staying put, ever so slightly pick that up, and now all I have to do is finish squaring. Again, I'm lining up my 1/4 right on that line. And because I lined it up on the mat underneath of it, it ought to lay nicely on that too, which it does. So 2 edges down, 2 more to go. And I know some people said always use your rulers, don't use your mats underneath. And my theory is everything had to go and get the same type of inch when they set these things up, so they all should be pretty darn close. So I say, hey, why not use every tool available, right? There's the 3rd. And one more turn for that final. And again, I'm looking at that 1/4, and I know that's going to be off because remember I said that one was the wonky one, but I'm good here along the edge to get that pretty 6.5. And there we go. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. So that's it for the 9 patch. I hope you've enjoyed some of these tips. If you've learned something, give me a big old thumbs up there at the end. Don't forget to put a little label on this guy so that you remember which block this is, because it's going to come in handy at the end when we go to put everything together. Give it a nice best press or starch if you like, otherwise set it aside, and let's head into block number 6. Stay tuned, and I'll see you next time in my quilt lab. Have a good one. Bye-bye.